Destination NAT. Okay, everyone, in this video, we're going to be looking at performing NAT on the Palo Alto Firewall. In this case, we're going to do Destination NAT, a very common task we do on firewalls. We have our scenario here. In this case, we have a client with a public IP. We have a web server that is sitting on the DMZ. This network cannot reach my client because it's on the outside. Private address spaces are not routable to the outside, in this case to the internet. So we need to perform a destination NAT in order for this client to reach this particular server because it's hosting an application publicly available. We need to create a destination NAT policy and also a security policy to allow that client reach that particular web server. So we're going to create, first of all, our NAT object. Once we create that object, we're then going to have that particular inside address allowed from the outside in order for my client to hit that particular web server. So let's go ahead and begin configuring destination NAT. Let's go ahead and configure a NAT rule that will allow communication from the outside to that web server. Go ahead and click on policies. Let's click on NAT, and then we're going to click add. Let's type the name of the NAT rule. In this case will be web server 1, and we're going to call it destination NAT. And we mentioned we're coming from the outside, right? We're going to the DMZ, but this is a tricky part here. In Palo Alto, destination is still the outside because the IP that we're pointing from the client side, it's the outside public IP, not the DMZ. So you got to be very careful when you configure destination NAT on the Palo Alto because you want to go to the destination that the public IP is currently sitting at. So in this case, we're going to the same destination. And I know it looks a little bit confusing. In reality, it makes sense. You're going to a public IP as the destination. So you're coming from the outside, but you're still hitting at a public IP that is sitting on our outside network. And this is where translation will take magic. Once we convert that into the private IP, then it will forward onto the security policy, and then it will traverse the zone. So it will traverse from the outside to the DMZ in this case, and you'll see it in a bit. Destination, zone, outside. Destination interface. You can select a specific interface that traffic wants to hit on the outside. But in this case, we're just going to leave it as any. It's just going to select any available interface and see if either one of them will match the destination, either based on a route. So you might have a route going to that actual destination via a particular interface, or else you just let the Palo Alto, find the match and select that particular interface. Source address. Any coming from the outside. We don't know what's the source address of my client side, so we're just going to leave it as any. Destination. Okay, destination will match the public IP because remember, we're going to the outside zone and the destination on the outside is still the public IP. So in our slide, we mentioned that it was the 40.33.22.10, and that is my web server's public IP, and this is the IP that we're gonna allocate, and we're gonna point it to the actual server on the DMZ. And then translated packet. Okay, so we have the source address translation, and in this case we're doing destination. On the second video we're gonna do source address translation. Destination address translation. Translation type. Dynamic IP or static. Static, it's basically a one-to-one NAT. We're mapping the public IP to the specific inside, or in this case, DMZ IP. So we want to do a static on this case. Translated address. This is where the actual server's private address will be translated to. This case will be 10.100.0.10. Port, if you want to map a specific port, in this case PAD, or doing port address translation, you can map to a specific port. In this case, we're just going to do a one-to-one NAT. Any port to, from any source, we're just going to map it to this particular, as long as it hits the web server. So if we're going to the web server, no matter what destination port, it's just going to translate using a one-to-one basis. And we're going to go and click OK. Okay, so now we have the rule there. We have the source zone and destination. Both of them are the outside. Sure, because you're coming from the outside and you want to hit an IP that is still on the outside, right? However, once it hits this, the Palo Alto will see, oh, well, going to the outside, and this is my IP, but I do have a rule that if you want to get here, let me forward you to this actual translation, which is DMC web server's actual IP. Okay, so we have that. Second part, we want to allow the security. This just does NAT translation. This just translates the address. It does not allow the traffic to go through. So you gotta make sure that you configure one, the NAT rule, and then the security rule. So we got two policy tables, NAT policy table and security policy table. Now we need to allow the traffic inbound to that public IP. And this is another thing that will make you a little bit confused, but it also makes sense. You're still going to the public IP. So you're trying to reach a resource that is sitting on this public IP. However, the real IP is this one. So want to make sure that you have that clear. And again, practice makes perfection. Make sure that you practice this. If you have a test Palo Alto, you can definitely build this very easily and practice so you can get the idea. Security. Let's click on Add. Name. Call this web server 1-NAT. Let's click on source. In this case, my source is the outside because I am coming from the outside. Source address, we don't know the source of the address. Destination. This is what it gets a little bit more confusing. Now we're actually pointing the DMZ because this is my true destination. Even though that I'm translating to a pointing a public IP, as soon as the NAT takes place, it actually points to the inside, or in this case, to the actual zone, which is the DMZ zone. And then basically, destination address, very important. What address do you think we're gonna add this on the destination? If you were thinking the private IP, you're wrong. It's the public IP. Again, yes, it doesn't make sense because we're actually going to the DMZ. It should be the destination of the actual DMZ address, but no. The match will make this Palo Alto for the traffic to the actual destination, which in this case is the DMZ, and you're gonna see it in a bit. And by the way, we can do it for this demonstration. Let's put the DMZ and see what happens. We're just gonna leave it as the private, but it definitely will be the public. So you're gonna see that in a bit. And allowed application. Let's just make sure that we're just allowing everything because I want to just do a ping test to the actual server. Click OK. And let's go ahead and, first of all, let's go ahead and click commit. And once we commit, we'll test and see how that goes. Okay, so I just wanted to explain a little bit in case you were a little bit confused. We have to make two policies. One, the NAT rule, and then the security rule or security policy. Destination NAT rule. I am incoming from the outside, and I am hitting a public IP that is still on the outside because that's the public IP that everyone will point in order for them to reach the web server. So source, I am incoming from the outside, but I'm still reaching a public IP that is going to be on the outside. But then my NAT rule will say, well, if you're pointing to that public IP that sits on the outside zone, I'm going to translate that to my real IP, which in this case will be the DMZ server's IP. Now, we need to allow that traffic to go inbound into the web server because we just made the translation, but we haven't done the security policy. Source zone, still the outside. Now, we're actually going to the real destination. Now, this is a security policy. We need to allow the outside to talk to the DMZ. But the destination address will match the public address that has been used as the destination NAT. In this case, the address that sits on my destination NAT rule, it's my actual destination address in the security policy. And I actually configure the security policy to put the actual private or real, so you can see that it will not work if we do it that way. It has to be the public or the address that everyone is pointing, so it actually matches the traffic and sends that to the correct destination. So we want to say that the Palo Alto, hey, you want to find that public address in the DMZ. However, that public address, it's basically just a translated address or the NAT that we're using to get to the actual web server. So let's go ahead and see how that goes on the virtual machine. So I have a very, very lightweight virtual machine, and this virtual machine will act as the client, and I should be able to ping the outside interface on the Palo Alto from this virtual machine. Okay, so let's go ahead and ping my outside. Okay, so this is the Palo Alto's outside interface. Now we know that we have reachability. However, if we pin the NAT address that we're intending to hit in order for us to get to the web server, remember I just put the security policy to point to the actual private IP, and this will not work. Let's go ahead and do it. And you can see we're timing out. Let's go back onto the Palo Alto and see how that looks like on the head counter. Okay, so if we take a look at the NAT, we indeed saw that it got a head count of 5. However, we're not able to reach ICMP, so we're not able to ping the web server because the policy it's pointing to the private IP instead of the public, and we don't have a match because I am still sending the traffic inbound using the destination as the public IP, and this is why it will not match the rule. It will fall straight into my implicit deny. So you can see here that I have 5 hit counts. It's an implicit deny because the destination hasn't been translated. Till I have approval to move between the zones, then I will be translating myself to the actual destination, to the real destination. So let's make that change and see the outcome. Let's go ahead and remove here. I'm going to click a new, I'm going to add a new one. In this case will be the public translated address, 40.33.22.10. Okay, let's press OK. And now let's apply it and see what will happen. Okay, commit has finished. Let's go ahead and open our virtual machine and give it a shot again. Difference, huh? Like I mentioned, the Palo Alto still needs to see that the destination is the public IP, even though that it's not a real, it's just a translated address. I need to first match destination to be the public so the Palo Alto can perform the translation on it. I am actually hitting the NAT rule. I am actually matching the NAT rule, but until I have access to the DMC, then it's going to be applied. I am actually going to be translated. So very important. And again, practice makes perfection. Just practice on your own, lab it, and you're going to understand why this is the way to do Destination NAT on the Palo Alto. And let's take a look at the hit counter and see if we now have increments. Let me do a quick refresh, and sure enough, now I have 5 hit counts on that particular policy. Okay, everyone, so we just finished our Destination NAT video. In our next video, we're gonna discuss Source NAT. Thank you for watching.